Good morning, Kalimirasas. So my presentation today is Culture Eats Systems for Breakfast. It's a gross sounding name, but what it really means is a bad culture can beat a good system and even beat good people any day. So just to start with an example, so this is the Eurasian Dream back in 1998, a car carrier, though there was no EV on board but just normal combustion engines. So there was a fire on board one of the cars, and the fire quickly spread to the entire ship, and the ship was a total loss. The ship owner tried to limit his liability under the Hague-Wisby rules, but the judge said, no, your ship was unseaworthy, so therefore you cannot limit the liability. And it is unseaworthy for the following reasons. The crew were not properly trained. In fact, every first Sunday of the month, they used to just go and stand. It's like a well-rehearsed drill. So they used to go stand, there used to be a talk, okay, and then they used to, go for lunch, okay. So the judge didn't say in as many words, but what he was referring to was the culture on board was poor. So what you see, the tip of the iceberg is the incident. You can even go a level deeper and see human performance or human behaviors. You can go further down and you can make some analysis of systems. But what really lies at the core is the culture, which manifests as an incident at some point. So from 1998, now if you move to the 2000s and 2020s, you will see there is a reference to safety culture in investigation reports, in court judgments. So it's very much there, and it's going to come in more and more reports. Also, you've seen in the OCIMF Human Factors booklet, there's a reference to culture and how to look at it. And these are some examples of dysfunctional cultures. You will see top-down management, just do as I tell you to do. Let's not discuss. Somebody keeps the information. I think there was a reference to it by Captain Daniel, focusing on blame. I recall from my sailing days as a master, you called the DPA, when you had a problem, and he would say, how the hell did you manage to do this? So, instead of trying to solve a problem, immediately he used to go on the offensive. Not because he was a bad person, but he had to be retrained to take his call in a different way. Okay, then of course there are, abusive cases, hiding problems, and then working alone and without support. And ultimately what results is it affects the results and accountability and trust. Now, if you're not familiar with all these things, okay, if you've never experienced all this, just tell me where you work, and I'll apply for a job there. Okay. So it's not that difficult. The culture is about humans, and it's all human behavior oriented. Okay, so what I've tried to do is present the concept of safety culture or culture, which can be an abstract concept, into a more tangible model, which I call the Safe Man model. Okay, the Safe Man model is based on the Pac-Man game. So, Pac-Man, he goes around, does his job. Now, if any one of you have not played Pac-Man and you want to feel free to embarrass yourself, you can lift up your hand. So what essentially happens is you have the game which represents basically the work we do in the office or on the ship, and we have to do it without having an incident or an accident and trying to avoid the devils. And you have some safety features like the hard controls, soft controls, personal protective equipment, and crisis preparation. But even if you have these controls, there is always a risk that there will be a near miss or an accident. So that's why you also have in the game certain energy bars or power. So even if the Pac-Man gets injured, he still has more lives. So this culture gives resilience. It gives a learning culture, and also to warn the other Pac-Man or safe man that there is there's a danger at some point. So these 7 energy bags or power pills are, in a simplified way, the components of safety culture. And I will go through these 7 points one by one. So the first is create symbols. So symbols can be both physical in terms of the environment that we work in. Let's say when you're going up a gangway or you go to any office, just by looking at the reception and the way you are greeted and then the way you interact with the other people, you can get a sense of what is going on in this office. And like they say, when the port state control officer goes up the gangway, by the time he's up to the captain's cabin, he already knows how many deficiencies he has to give. Okay, so these are symbols that are a good element and a very physical manifestation of the culture on board. Then you have feedback channels. So feedback is very important in the sense, what happens is whether on board a ship or in an organization, there are so many levels of management. So, but the real work, and I don't want to embarrass anyone or insult anyone, but the real work happens at the front line, where the person is meeting the client, where the chief engineer is talking with the port state control officer or the SAR inspector. So these are the places where the real action happens. And these people at the front line, they really know what's the real life problem, and they give the feedback. But many times, like Chinese whispers, I think it's called. So by the time the feedback starts at one point and it reaches the management, it has changed its complexion totally. So so we need to create systems for people to report feedback, but also very important is how we receive feedback and do we take action. Often we see, going on board a ship, there's a QMS review, and you ask, okay, what's the follow-up on the QMS review? There's none to see. So that indicates that feedback is not really welcome, though there is something in writings saying that we welcome feedback. Okay. Hands-on risk management. So there's a saying that a leader needs to know to be at the right place at the right time. So that's a sense when the leader is really involved. So this speaks to leadership, and sometimes to get the boots on the ground to actually see what is happening, guide the team in making sure that the right thing is done. Share stories. Again, this is something which Captain Daniel referred to earlier. So it doesn't always have to be a formal system. And as humans, we have been learning from each other through stories, through thousands of years. And that's why we know, okay, what are the good things to do? What are the things which don't lead to good outcomes? So, and these, when you have an informal setting and you share stories, that's a great way to learn. And, I'm going to date myself, but I started sailing in '92. So at those times we didn't have e-learning. Okay, so it was more about learning from what others said, and there was an accident here, this person got trapped in an enclosed space, and that kind of informed you what things to take care of. Enforce routines. When I was getting my first command in 2003, and the person in the office, he said, we have certain systems in place. If you follow them, you can't go wrong. And I've taken the advice, and it's always stood me in good stead that there are certain systems about drills which done properly, not like the one on the Eurasian Dream, you can have good outcomes. And reinforce. So there is no point of having a routine or a system if we cannot make sure that it is implemented properly. So whether it's a good behavior, or a bad behavior, and both need to be reinforced. So it's not like you criticize people only when they're doing something wrong and don't give them feedback when they're doing something good. So even if something good has taken place, it's crucial that you don't lose the opportunity and you appreciate them for the job well done, so they know that more of this is expected and they know that what their effort is appreciated. And lastly is decide safety first. So, talk is cheap. We can all say things, safety first, but when it comes to actually making a decision, for example, you have to reach a port to meet a laycan and the weather is bad or there is restricted visibility, does the master make a decision to slow down? So, or you have or in the office, you may get the same question, do I slow down? And do I have an equipment which is not working, so should I leave the port? So these are the decisions where what you have in the manual, because a manual cannot cover all the situations, but that's where the culture really manifests itself, and that's the chance to show what it means. And a good culture is also results in safety, but also in happiness on board. So, like I said, culture can be an abstract notion, but there is a way that you can actually measure it, you can improve it, and you can get a sense of it. But it comes through observation. It's not going to happen remotely. It's going to happen with observing what happens on board. You see if people, the leaders on board are really creating the right culture on board. And leadership is like water, it flows downhill. So the kind of leadership that is exhibited at the top is what you're going to see at the bottom, at the crew level. So you can get a sense of it, you can measure it, you can create a radar chart and see where you stand. So with this, thank you very much for your time, and have a good night.